This is one of the most heartbreaking and controversial cases in recent memory, and at its center is the tragic death of Jason Corbett, a loving father whose life was taken under mysterious and brutal circumstances. Welcome back to Chilling Fireside Stories, where I share real-life cases that deserve to be remembered with the utmost care and respect. While these stories can be difficult to hear, I strive to present them in a way that honors the victims and makes them bearable for my community. Now, settle in and let's begin. Jason Corbett was born on February 12, 1976, in Limerick, Ireland, to John and Rita Corbett. One of 8 siblings, he shared a special bond with his twin brother Wayne. Growing up, Jason's family faced financial struggles, though his sister Tracy later reflected that their parents worked tirelessly to keep their children happy and healthy. Jason's strong work ethic emerged early. When his father lost his job, Jason took on a part-time security role at the school's sports center to help support the family. This sense of responsibility and dedication became defining traits that endeared him to everyone who knew him. Among those who loved Jason was Margaret Fitzpatrick, affectionately known as Mags. Their connection was undeniable, and it wasn't long before they married and began building a life together. By September 2004, they welcomed their first child, a son named Jack, followed 2 years later by their daughter Sarah. Their family felt complete, and Jason and Mags were deeply in love, cherishing their children and the life they had created. But tragedy struck on November 21, 2006, just 3 months after Sarah's birth. That night, Mags woke up struggling to breathe. She was having a severe asthma attack. Despite her familiarity with the condition and attempts to use her nebulizer, nothing worked. Jason rushed her to the hospital, but heartbreakingly, Mags didn't make it. At just 31 years old, she passed away, leaving Jason, then 30, devastated and suddenly a single father to 2 young children. Jason's sister Tracy recalled the moment she and her husband arrived at the hospital. One look at Jason's face told her everything. He had lost the love of his life and felt as though his entire world had crumbled. Yet, even in his grief, Jason knew he had to be strong for Jack and Sarah. His children became his purpose, giving him the strength to carry on despite the overwhelming loss. With the support of both his and Mag's families, Jason began navigating life as a single parent. However, his independent nature made him reluctant to rely too heavily on others. Determined to provide the best care for his children, he decided to hire an au pair in 2007. His first attempts with a Czech and then a Spanish au pair didn't work out due to language barriers. Determined to find someone who spoke English and was ready for a long-term role, Jason came across Molly Martins in February 2008. At 25, Molly had submitted an application that seemed perfect, claiming impressive credentials, including a degree from Clemson University and experience as a foster parent. What Jason didn't know at the time, however, was that much of Molly's resume was fabricated, claims that would later come to light and cast doubt on her character. Molly, who lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, arrived in Ireland on March 10, 2008. However, her arrival was rocky. She was initially denied entry at customs due to her one-way ticket and lack of proper work documentation. Determined to take the job, Molly quickly sorted the issue, booking a round-trip flight and returning to Ireland almost immediately. When she finally made it through customs, she was picked up by one of Jason's close friends. That friend later admitted that her first impression of Molly wasn't positive. She described Molly as young, overly polished, and dressed more like a pageant contestant than a caregiver, raising concerns about whether she was truly the right fit for Jason and his children. Despite initial reservations, Molly seemed to win over Jack and Sarah quickly, and Jason believed she was settling into her role as an au pair. However, their professional relationship soon took a personal turn. It's widely speculated that Jason and Molly began dating shortly after her arrival, with some suggesting their romantic relationship started on her very first night in Ireland. Regardless of when it began, the dynamic quickly shifted from employer-employee to something much more complicated, a development Jason likely knew was problematic, especially with Molly living in his home. Molly's past, however, wasn't left behind in America. Before moving to Ireland, she had been in a relationship with a man named Keith, who claimed they hadn't even officially broken up before her departure. Keith later disclosed that Molly had been struggling with her mental health and had recently been released from a psychiatric facility at the time she accepted the job with Jason. He didn't believe she was in the right frame of mind to care for two grieving children and expressed his shock when she cut off all contact with him 2 weeks after arriving in Ireland, telling him she was never coming back. While things on the surface seemed to go smoothly between Molly, Jason, and the children, Jason's sister Tracy later reflected on early warning signs. Molly rarely shared details about her life back in the U.S., avoiding questions about her past. She also appeared to dislike Jason's closest friends, particularly his best friend Paul. Tracy speculated that Molly may have been trying to isolate Jason from those he trusted, a pattern that would only become clearer in hindsight. While Jason's friends and family initially supported his relationship with Molly Martins, hoping it would bring happiness back into his life, signs of tension began to surface just months after she arrived in Ireland. Emails between the two revealed Jason's growing concerns about how quickly their relationship was progressing. Still grieving the loss of his first wife, Mags, Jason admitted he wasn't sure he wanted to marry again. To create some distance, Jason temporarily sent Molly home to visit her family, and during this time, they agreed she would find another job and move out when she returned to Ireland. However, when Molly came back, she remained in Jason's home and continued to embed herself into his and his children's lives. Molly began expressing discomfort living in the house that Jason had shared with Mags, claiming she felt like she was living in her shadow. After persistent urging, Jason reluctantly agreed to sell the family home. Strikingly, the sale was finalized on the 3rd anniversary of Mags's death, a day Jason himself felt was an ominous sign but proceeded with nonetheless. On Valentine's Day 2010, Jason proposed to Molly, influenced largely by how much his children Jack and Sarah had bonded with her. For Jason, their happiness was paramount, despite his own lingering doubts. Soon after the engagement, Molly confessed to feeling homesick and issued Jason an ultimatum: either they move to America together or break up. Eager to maintain stability for his children and believing they would deeply miss Molly, Jason made the difficult decision to relocate his family to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The move was relatively seamless for Jason's career, allowing him to transfer his job overseas. Once settled, Jason purchased a spacious 5-bedroom home, and on June 4, 2011, he and Molly married in Knoxville, Tennessee, Molly's hometown. The wedding appeared picturesque with Jason's children taking part as the ring bearer and flower girl. However, according to Jason's sister Tracy, the day was far from ideal. In her book, Tracy recounted several troubling moments, including Molly's claim to her bridesmaids that she had been friends with Mags and that Mags had died of cancer, both outright fabrications. Molly's behavior at the wedding also raised eyebrows. Despite these incidents, life in North Carolina seemed idyllic from the outside. Jason, a friendly and sociable neighbor, thrived in his community while working as a manager at a packaging plant, and Molly, working part-time as a swim instructor, focused much of her time on Jack and Sarah, who eventually started calling her mom. Yet, cracks in their relationship continued to grow, especially over Molly's desire to formally adopt Jason's children. Jason resisted, not out of malice, but because doubts about their relationship had begun to creep in. As tensions continued to grow between Jason and Molly, the relationship that once offered hope and stability began to unravel. Jason was seriously considering divorce and moving back to Ireland with Jack and Sarah. He confided to Molly that things between them had deteriorated to an unbearable level. Troubled by what he described as escalating issues, Jason went as far as hiding the children's passports, fearing that Molly might take drastic actions to keep them apart. To prepare for a potential custody battle, Molly sought legal advice and was reportedly encouraged to document any behavior that could portray Jason as an unfit parent. Following this advice, she placed recording devices around their home, hoping to capture evidence of his temper or any behavior that might bolster her case. One of these recordings, taken during a family dinner, surfaced later. While the argument captured on tape did not depict physical violence, it revealed tension and frustration in their interactions, with Jason sounding angry and impatient.
Are you finished with your dinner, hon?
I'm talking to you.
No.
Is this how you treat? This is what you just ignore me? I said I'd like to have dinner with my family. I'm talking to you. I shouldn't have to say it over and over. I shouldn't have to say, Molly.
Can you guys get out the stuff for pancakes?
The recording raised questions but provided no definitive answers, further dividing opinions about their relationship. Molly later alleged that Jason was controlling and abusive. However, she had never reported these claims to the police or shared them with anyone during their relationship. While silence is not uncommon in cases of domestic violence due to fear of retaliation or societal stigma, the absence of corroborating evidence left many questioning the truth of her allegations. Jason's family strongly refuted these claims, portraying him as a loving father and partner, while Molly's family stood by her accounts, insisting that Jason was volatile and controlling. With both sides presenting conflicting narratives, the full truth of their relationship remained elusive. On the night of August 1st, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited the home Jason and Molly shared in North Carolina. The reason for their visit has been the subject of speculation. While some suggest it was a routine family visit, others believe it may have been strategically planned. They arrived around 8:30 p.m. with gifts for the children, a baseball bat for Jack and a tennis racket for Sarah. Since it was late, the gifts were set aside to be given to the children the next morning. That night, the household settled into its usual sleeping arrangements. Tom and Sharon stayed in the guest bedroom in the basement. Jason and Molly went to their bedroom on the first floor, and both children were asleep upstairs. According to Molly's later account, she was woken up around 3 a.m. by Sarah coming into their room. In the early hours of August 2nd, 2015, Molly Martins claimed that her daughter Sarah woke her up after having a bad dream. Molly said she comforted Sarah and returned her to bed, but when she came back to her room, Jason was awake and furious about being disturbed. According to Molly, this escalated into a heated argument, which she alleged ultimately led to Jason's death. Molly's father, Tom Martins, a former FBI agent, later stated that he heard strange noises from upstairs and went to investigate. Grabbing the baseball bat he had planned to gift Jack the next day, Tom entered the master bedroom. He claimed to have found Jason with his hands around Molly's neck. According to Tom, Jason turned to face him, put Molly in a chokehold, and dragged her toward the bathroom, threatening to kill her. Tom said he pleaded with Jason to let her go, but when Jason refused, he struck him with the bat. Tom alleged that the initial blows had no effect, and Jason continued choking Molly. Desperate, Tom said he kept hitting Jason until Molly was freed. The story continued with Tom claiming that Jason then grabbed the bat, leading to a struggle between the two men. Tom stated that Jason pushed him to the ground and Molly, fearing for her father's life, picked up a brick from her bedside table and struck Jason. Together, Tom and Molly said they continued hitting Jason, Tom with the bat and Molly with the brick, until Jason was no longer a threat. They insisted they stopped as soon as Jason went down. At 3 a.m., a 911 call was placed. Tom's voice can be heard saying,
Davidson County 911. My son-in-law got in a fight with my daughter. I intervened, and he's in bad shape.
Then he said that his son-in-law is bleeding all over and that he may have killed him, but it was a self-defense. However, when emergency responders arrived, the scene told a far more violent story than one of self-defense. One first responder described the attack as overkill, noting the extent of Jason's injuries. Jason's injuries were devastating, with responders describing the extent of the trauma as severe and life-altering. The back of his skull was completely crushed, indicating he was defenseless during the final moments of the attack. The sheer brutality of the scene left no doubt about the violence he endured. The bedroom was a blood-soaked scene, with splatters on the walls and floor. Blood on Jason's body, and the brick had already begun to dry, and his body was cold to the touch, indicating that his death had not been recent. Jason was found naked, adding another layer of mystery to the events of that night. Fortunately, Jack and Sarah slept through the horrific events of that night, shielded from the immediate trauma. However, years later, Sarah revealed a chilling detail. She claimed that Molly had given her a pill that evening, which she believed was meant to help her sleep. Sarah also suspected that Jack had been given a similar pill, raising unsettling questions about Molly's intentions and the lengths she may have gone to in controlling the situation. Officer Clay Dagenhart played a compassionate and protective role in shielding young Sarah and Jack from the horrific aftermath of their father's death. When it became necessary to move the children downstairs so they could stay with their grandmother in the basement, Sarah woke up and he gently gave her a choice. He could either carry her or walk her downstairs, but only if she promised to keep her eyes closed. With care and empathy, he ensured that Sarah was spared from witnessing the devastating scene, a small but significant act of kindness in the midst of unimaginable tragedy. Meanwhile, Molly was escorted to a patrol car, where she waited for an hour before being evaluated by paramedics. Officers noted that while Molly made crying noises, she showed no visible tears. She repeatedly rubbed her neck, claiming pain from being choked by Jason, but aside from a small red mark, she had no significant injuries. Tom, despite claiming to have struggled with Jason over the bat, also showed no signs of injury. Both Molly and Tom were taken to the station for questioning and photographed extensively. Molly's statement reiterated her claim that she and her father acted in self-defense, alleging that Jason had been drinking heavily that day and was enraged after being woken up. However, the evidence at the scene raised serious doubts about their version of events. She claimed she had endured years of abuse in her relationship with Jason but had stayed silent out of fear of losing custody of Jack and Sarah. In an interview with ABC, she said,
He was very controlling and he was very possessive, annoyed that I would develop some feelings for someone else or that somebody would look at me the wrong way. Everything always felt so real and so scary.
However, during their investigation, police found no evidence to support Molly's allegations of physical abuse. While recordings captured Jason's temper during arguments, investigators did not believe they indicated a pattern of violence. Tom's statement aligned with Molly's, adding that Jason had been heavily drinking that evening. He also made the shocking and false claim that Jason's first wife, Mags, had died under mysterious circumstances, and while having a conversation with Mags' father, he claimed that Jason killed her daughter, a statement that deeply angered Jason's family, as Mags' death from an asthma attack had been medically confirmed.
Making polite chit-chat, polite conversation. I said, what do you think of old Jason? And his response was, I think he killed my daughter.
Jason's sister Tracy was devastated upon learning of her brother's death. She revealed that Jason had been planning to return to Ireland with his children, leaving Molly behind, a detail that raised questions about potential motives. Tracy flew to the U.S. immediately and shared her doubts about Molly's story with detectives who were already planning a full investigation. On August 3rd, just 24 hours after Jason's death, an autopsy confirmed that he had died from blunt force trauma to the head. The medical examiner documented extensive skull fractures, lacerations, and contusions, noting that the injuries were so severe they couldn't determine the exact number of blows. At least one strike occurred post-mortem, further complicating Molly and Tom's claims of self-defense. The toxicology report contradicted Molly's assertion that Jason had been drinking heavily. His blood alcohol content was a mere 0.02%, far from intoxicated. However, the report revealed the presence of trazodone, a medication Molly had been prescribed just days earlier. Jason had reportedly told a doctor shortly before his death that he was experiencing sudden, inexplicable anger, leading his family to suspect that Molly may have been spiking his drinks with the medication. Meanwhile, Jack and Sarah were temporarily placed with Molly's brother. On August 3rd, they were interviewed by a social worker who hoped their accounts would clarify the dynamics of Jason and Molly's relationship. Both children, who referred to Molly as Mom, corroborated her claims of abuse, describing Jason as frequently angry and aggressive.
And when he would get mad, what would he do? He would physically and verbally hurt my mom.
Did you see him physically hurt her?
Once or twice.
What did you see?
Punching, hitting, pushing.
This complicated the investigation, as their statements lent credibility to Molly's version of events. One particularly puzzling detail was the brick Molly used during the altercation. Detectives found it odd that a brick was on her bedside table, but Molly explained that it was part of an art project she and the children had planned. Jack confirmed this, stating that Molly had brought the brick inside because of recent rain. While some found this explanation plausible, others questioned its validity, suspecting it might have been premeditated. The battle for custody of Jack and Sarah became a heated point of contention, reflecting the deep animosity between Jason Corbett's family and Molly Martin's. Molly initially claimed that Jason's sister Tracy had attempted to kidnap the children, an accusation that further complicated an already fraught situation. Eventually, a court ruled in favor of Tracy and her husband, granting them custody in accordance with Jason's will. This marked a significant victory for Jason's family, though tensions between the two families remained high. Molly's antagonism toward Jason's loved ones was evident in her handling of his memorial service. She barred Jason's family from attending and even hired security to ensure they didn't try to show up. Disputes continued over what would happen to Jason's body. Molly wanted him cremated immediately, while Tracy insisted on returning him to Ireland for burial. Molly ultimately agreed, but only if Tracy covered all funeral expenses. Tracy complied, and Jason's remains were brought home to Ireland. Jason's family worried that justice might never come for his death, but on December 18, 2015, both Molly and her father Tom Martins were arrested after a grand jury indicted them on charges of second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. They pleaded not guilty, and their joint trial was set for July 2017. Ahead of the trial, Molly gave a televised interview, maintaining her claims of abuse and her innocence. However, by this time, Jack and Sarah had recanted their earlier statements supporting Molly's allegations, instead asserting that their father was never abusive and that they were coerced into lying. Yet, because these new statements were deemed inadmissible in court, neither the prosecution nor the defense could use them to their advantage. During the trial, the prosecution presented a robust case, relying on forensic evidence, testimony from first responders, and blood spatter analysis. A bloodstain pattern expert testified that the evidence contradicted Molly and Tom's version of events, asserting that Jason had been attacked while defenseless on the ground. The defense struggled to counter this narrative, focusing on portraying Jason as a violent and abusive husband. They leaned heavily on Tom's testimony, banking on his background as a former FBI agent to lend credibility to their case. Molly, on the other hand, chose not to take the stand, a calculated move to avoid intense scrutiny under cross-examination. Ultimately, the jury deliberated for only 3 hours before delivering a guilty verdict on August 9, 2017. Both Molly and Tom were sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison for Jason's murder. The courtroom was thick with emotion as tears flowed from all sides. Jurors later described their decision, stating that while the altercation may have begun as self-defense, the sheer brutality of the attack far exceeded what could be justified. One juror noted that Molly had multiple opportunities to de-escalate the situation but instead chose to stay and continue the assault. Barely a week after their convictions, Molly and Tom filed an appeal, citing juror misconduct among other grievances. Allegations included jurors discussing the trial on Facebook and improper communication with the press. Their motion was initially denied in December 2017, but they escalated the appeal to the Supreme Court of North Carolina. In early 2021, the court ruled in their favor, overturning their convictions due to these procedural errors. Both Molly and Tom were released on a $200,000 bond, setting the stage for a retrial. Following the overturning of their 2017 convictions for second-degree murder, Molly Martins and her father, Tom Martins, were released from Davidson County Jail on bail in early 2021. Their case had been under intense scrutiny since the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled that procedural errors, including jury misconduct, invalidated their convictions and mandated a new trial. While many speculated that a plea deal might be reached, both Molly and Tom maintained their not guilty pleas. Their retrial, initially scheduled for June 2023, was postponed to November 8, 2023. In November 2023, rather than face another lengthy and emotionally taxing trial, Molly and Tom accepted plea deals. They pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, a lesser charge than their original conviction. The plea agreement resulted in sentences of 51 to 74 months in prison. However, with credit for the 44 months they had already served, their remaining time in custody was reduced to an additional 7 to 30 months, depending on good behavior. During sentencing, Judge David Hall acknowledged the time Molly and Tom had already served following their 2017 conviction. Jason's family, while expressing disappointment with the sentencing, released a statement emphasizing their gratitude for the dedication and hard work of the Davidson County Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office over the past 8 years. They also shared their intention to find a path forward, asking for privacy as they moved on with the comforting knowledge that Jason would forever remain in their hearts and memories. The courtroom during the plea hearing was filled with raw emotion. Jason's children, who had been present in the house on the night of the murder, delivered powerful victim impact statements. They described the profound loss of their father and the manipulation they endured at the hands of Molly and Tom, who had coerced them into making false statements about their father's character. Jason's family, including his sister Tracy Lynch, expressed their heartbreak and frustration over the reduced sentences, feeling that justice had not been fully served. The plea deal brought an end to the legal proceedings, but the case continues to resonate deeply with those involved. Jack and Sarah, who were just 10 and 8 years old when their father was killed, have grown into accomplished young adults. After their father's tragic death, they were adopted by their Aunt Tracy and her husband David and moved back to Ireland, where they found healing and purpose. Sarah has become an advocate for children dealing with loss, penning a series of children's books aimed at helping kids navigate grief. Her debut book, Noodle Loses Dad, mirrors her own journey of loss and resilience and has been shared with children in her hometown of Limerick. Sarah's heartfelt mission is to encourage children facing challenges to find hope and strength, even in their darkest moments. Adding to her advocacy for justice, Sarah Corbett Lynch recently published a deeply personal memoir titled A Time for Truth. In this powerful account, Sarah shares her journey of healing and her fight to reclaim her father's legacy. The book sheds light on the emotional and psychological abuse she and her brother Jack endured, as well as the manipulation they faced in the aftermath of Jason's death. Through her writing, Sarah not only honors her father's memory but also seeks to empower others who have experienced loss and trauma. Her memoir has been praised for its raw honesty and its message of resilience and hope. Jack, meanwhile, has pursued his passions as a singer-songwriter and a skilled rugby player, all while continuing to honor his father's memory. Both Jack and Sarah remain steadfast in their pursuit of justice for Jason. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's help keep Jason's story alive and honors his memory, and as always, until my next video, stay safe and look after your loved ones.